Hello, everyone. Welcome to Black Man Speak. I'm your co-host, VJR Stewart.
And I'm your co-host, D. Tommy D. Duncan III, otherwise known as TD3. Jimmy, it is Wednesday, January the 25th, 2023. And if it's Wednesday night,
It's Black Man Speak. So let's give a big shout out to Liquid for providing our theme music. If you haven't already, please hit that like, subscribe, and notification button for us to help us out and spread the word. And also, we want to give a big shout out to Forest Films and our own studio for providing our virtual studio, to bring the show to you. And Tom, we know we're going to have another interesting show with some very interesting and topics. So why don't we jump in and get started? And why don't you get us started with what we're going to talk about tonight?
all right, Jimmy, thank you for the segue. We have a lot to talk about tonight, Jimmy. We are stepping up our game as we talked about at the beginning of the year
Yes.
and focusing on a broader variety of different things that are going on in our community. And tonight is no different. So, in no specific order, for those of you who have been keeping up with the news, and especially for those of you who have not, we're going to talk tonight a little bit about the protests that have been going on that have turned in a bad direction. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's been going on in Atlanta, Georgia. With that, this is a protest over, of course, a new training facility by the law enforcement agency there, the police department. Howard University wins a $90 million military contract, the first of its kind, to an HBCU for military research. Definitely interesting. We want to talk a little bit about that. And a little bit further south, Bethune Cookman Controversy. So, for those of you who may or may not be aware, there has been some drama going on down in the South in Florida. Um, started out, I won't even say started out, hit a highlight reel this past week surrounding Ed Reed, former NFL player, Hall of Famer, who was in talks to be the head coach there. Some things happen. It looks like that may not happen, but it has lit a fire under the students and a lot of alumni there that we're going to talk about that. The UN chair speaks on the Haitian crisis. Recently, we talked about that story last week, and the UN chair has some very interesting comments to say in terms of what needs to happen in Haiti to stabilize the area. And then, as we begin to focus a little bit on international stories as well. The Sierra Leone Parliament and President have now inked a new bill that is going to empower women, not only educationally, but also in the business and government sector. So, Jimmy, we have a lot to tackle tonight.
Yes, we do, Tom. So let's just jump in and get started.
All right, Jimmy. I tell you what. Why don't we do this? Since we're probably going to have about a little bit of time on each, I'll let you go ahead and start us off with the Atlanta protests that have turned into riots and all kinds of drama going on down there.
Well, yes, Tom. And so this is one of those that sort of mystify me. I believe in the past, folks were protesting to defund the police, or at the very least, they would make the point that the police need more training. And so when you're trying to build a training center in order to provide more training for the police, because this is what you thought people wanted, I'm not understanding what the protesters are out there protesting against. And then for one of the protesters to have an altercation with the officers and get shot, and I believe he's dead now. Um, or no, I'm sorry, he didn't get shot. He was beat to death. Is that the case?
Yeah, it
Um,
looks like it. From my understanding, Jimmy, it was a shooting incident.
okay, there was a shooting. There was another case where it was a beating incident where the person died. A young
This
black
person
man
was
died.
actually killed. Yeah, this person was actually killed.
So, but I'm going to go back to my point that I've always been making for years now. Please do not get into altercation with law enforcement officers. Do your absolute best to be respectful and comply to their instructions. If they are instructing you incorrectly, if they're doing anything wrong, they're violating the rules of the law in any kind of way, then get their name and badge number and file a complaint. Do not, under any circumstance, do anything threatening. Don't make any sudden moves. Don't give them any reason to draw a weapon on you because it's always going to end up bad for you. if you're dead and they lost their job, somehow you may think justice was served, but you're dead and they're still alive to get on with their life. Your life has come to an end over an altercation or a misunderstanding. So I would say, if you're going to protest, protest peacefully, be respectful, do not get into any kind of altercation with law enforcement.
Yeah, Jimmy, and this was a unfortunate incident because this, started out as a relatively peaceful protest, and it looks like, Jimmy, from some of the narrative. Of course, all of the story has not been told yet. I think there are 6 suspects that have been charged and arrested. I think 4 of them are being held without bond. 2 of them, I think, bonded out. Under 24-hour surveillance, Jimmy. But you had, again, some actors who were coming from out of Atlanta, out of the area, in some cases out of the state, and then kind of fanned the flames on this. And then, of course, you have rocks, fires, and they found folks, of course, with weapons and things of that nature, Jimmy. And so this turned bad really fast. And you have some folks, we'll call them agitators, Jimmy.
Right.
And these are some of the folks that, we saw when, we talked, in the last couple of years about, some of what we started out as peaceful protests around the country. And then you would have folks coming from out of the country agitating and or creating problems, more problems, and turning violent on what was a peaceful protest.
Yeah, Tom. So you have to be careful with who you associate with. And yeah, these things are beyond your control a lot of time. You don't know where people are coming from. You assume that they're there to protest in the same manner and fashion that you're there to protest. That may not always be the case, but if you discover that's not the case, then I would suggest that you walk away. Don't don't continue to be involved in a protest that gets out of control and somehow you become guilty through association.
Yeah, Jimmy, but in some cases, you have very little control when you have a group or groups who are protesting peacefully, and then you have folks who you don't have associated with, who you don't have association with, who are coming from God knows where, who actually want to create and foment violence in order to
Correct.
make your organized peaceful protest turn sour, in really to order to put a negative light on what you are doing. And so in this case, Jimmy, they didn't have control, over these folks who were coming in
Well,
from out
but
of
you have
state.
control of yourself, Tom. So you have to walk away in that case. You can't continue to stick around and participate knowing that there are bad actors that are there. As soon as you get a sign that this is going south, that's the time to pack it up and make your point by exiting. Don't continue to stay there and participate because as this thing escalates and goes south, it can go south really bad, and more people could be hurt just from standing around. And a lot of times, it is the innocent people who were there peacefully protesting that get wrapped up in the activities of some just a handful of bad actors. But it only takes a few when you have a small force trying to keep control of the situation.
And Jimmy, this is the thing. This could happen with any protest, whether
Yeah,
it's protesting against, what folks might feel to be lack of accountability for the police department or law enforcement in this case, and or trying to get a message for ensuring that there is accountability when bad things do happen, because we do know that there are some bad apples. I think that they are definitely in the minority, but there are some bad apples in law enforcement agencies. I definitely don't believe that they are the rule. But, when folks sit out and say, you know what, we need to make sure that there's accountability and you get these bad apples out of your force, and then something like this happens, is very unfortunate. Um, we definitely want to say our prayers for, the young man. I think he was only 26 years old.
very
Who died.
unfortunate.
And there are, different stories as to what happened. You never know. You never know which story is truly right, except for the people is there. And then, when you have even mass media, sometimes you don't know, what's accurate and what's contrived in mass media. I learned that lesson, Jimmy, when I was in college and got reported. Was on a news article from the college newspaper, and I didn't even recognize what I said based upon how they jacked up my statements. But all that being said, Jimmy, for the family of of the young man whose life was lost. We definitely want to send out our prayers to you. That is
Yes.
way too young to get involved with this, Jimmy. But I mean, I will agree. You have to figure out how to navigate around this, but this could have been a protest like this. This could have been something that happened, in the Roe v. Wade protest, or I'm sorry, the abortion and or the right to life protest. It could have happened any place, Jim.
Well, Tom, protesting to me doesn't seem like the proper course of action. But getting involved in changing the system from within seems to be a better course. So if you don't like the government that you have, then get involved, run for office, vet your candidates, make sure that you're voting for the right thing. And with that being said, Tom, here's a segue since you mentioned college. Let's move on to the next story of Bethune University and the controversy there.
Good deal. And before we do that, again, we want to thank everybody who has joined us this evening. Again, if you would subscribe, as Jimmy mentioned earlier, like and or share the information.
Hit the
And go
notification button.
Absolutely. So we can continue to have these great shows and great input. This is not for play. We're about serious business and informing our communities so that we can make better and or sound decisions. Also, join us on our chat line. Join us on our chat line. Please feel to express your thoughts and ask any questions there. And or finally, Jimmy, if anyone would like to call in to give
Yes,
their thoughts
the
or
chat line
questions.
is open, the phone line is open.
Exactly. The phone line is open 972 4972 497 2280. Now, let's change directions and go to Bethune Cookman. So, you know, unfortunately, Bethune Cookman, just like many of our HBCUs, have been historically denied their rightful funding from the state government and other resources. And so most of them, Jimmy, just really aren't in a very strong position financially. Bethune Cookman, one of those. But what happened that has shed light on a very common incident is Ed Reed, former Hall of Fame All Pro NFL safety for the Baltimore Ravens, was in conversations with Bethune Cookman College, small HBCU, private institution in South Florida. And something went way wrong. Unfortunately, I don't know how much due diligence was done, how many conversations they had, how many times he had visited the campus there. But, what we saw over the past, I guess, week or so were some videos, I believe, on Instagram Live when he was at the campus. There were some things that had been there, Jimmy, for a long time. Trash all over the place,
Right.
mold in some of the buildings, just
Not
not a
just mold, Tom. Some was black mold, which is dangerous.
exactly, exactly. So he, took some videos of this, put it on Instagram Live, kind of put the school on blast. And what we did not realize as we learned more about this, Jimmy, is that he actually didn't have a contract in place at the time. They basically, I believe, in a good faith effort, um, agreed to bring him on, and they actually, I think the college actually announced him becoming the coach, but I
Right.
don't believe that there was anything signed, Jimmy.
There
And so
wasn't.
he began to go out, recruit, start getting athletes that he had on his hit list to enroll in the school. And then when this happened, obviously there was pushback from the university, from the board of trustees, and unfortunately, Jimmy, it is going from bad to worse. He didn't have a formal offer; it wasn't signed, and it has turned into a big mess because you have one side saying one thing, another side saying the other thing in terms of what happened, Jimmy. But now the students and the alumni are chiming in because Jimmy, this didn't just happen, this last year, last month. This has been going on for years. And you have a lot of exposure to what's been going on in terms of, what's happening with the money that the college has been receiving, what some feel is a lack of responsibility on behalf of some of the leadership at that school. And quite frankly, a lot of folks are very angry and frustrated, Jimmy. And I don't know that there's an easy fix to this, Jimmy, but it definitely has been shared
Tom,
nationally.
okay, the fix is we have to get out of our own way. Okay, so if I'm applying for a head coaching job at HBCU, I'm looking at Deion Sanders, who was seemed to be a very successful head coach at HBCU, who turned the program around and took them to a championship and won it. But along the way, he also made some observations about things that were not right: the cafeteria, the dorm, the football field, the transportation. That just wasn't right. That look, we can't compete against Division 1A schools when you have conditions like this. And so I'm sure that this was probably some of the motivation. But then the other thing, Tom, is that this is where you and I disagree. We've talked about this in the past. When you had $30 billion over 10 years on the table, funding, signing the law by the orange president that every black person was told not to vote for, by the influencers, by the celebrity class. Tom, the first year that bill was in effect, that was $30 million to the HBCUs. It was going to be another $30 billion for every year after that. This year would have been $30 billion plus the inflation adjustment, which was another $240 million. So every university would have gotten about $32.5 million. And so I told you when money was cut out by the current Jim Crow prejudice racist president that 95% of black people voted for, that we were really voting against our interests at that point. And this was going to come back to bite us in the butt because there was no way in the world $30 million a year is going to be made up through the alumni class, through sports programs, through selling cookies and having a bake sale. That is a lot of money for the HBCUs to miss. If it was Harvard University, okay, their endowment's $100 billion. They wouldn't sleep. They wouldn't lose that much sleep over $30 million a year. But for the HBCUs, $30 million a university, Tom, that's a lot of money to miss. And so that's money now that could have been used to fix and address some of these conditions. Now, we already know that, according to some of the stuff that's come out, that some of these universities are not managed very well. They don't have very much money to play with. And so, in a situation like that, we have to be very conscious and very wise and very diligent about where we use our resources. And political resources is one of those things. We really shot ourselves in the foot by not voting for the person who supported us for 4 years, gave us sentencing guideline reform that we cried about for years that we didn't want. But when we voted for Obama, who took money away from HBCUs and gave it to the Latino schools, I didn't even know there were Latino schools in America to give money to. And then Jim Crow Joe Biden comes along and cuts out $30 billion of funding after you increase spending by $7 trillion in the last 2 years. The only thing you can find worth cutting in the budget was money to HBCUs. And somehow the Congressional Black Sellout Caucus hadn't raised enough noise about this, didn't do anything about it. The fraternities and sororities, to my disappointment, haven't made any noise about it, didn't make any stink about it. The black political class, from mayors to city councils to county commissioners, didn't make any noise about it. So in the end, Tom, we've gotten pretty much what we voted for.
Well, Jimmy, I don't think that this particular president, and we're talking about issues that are decades upon decades old. We haven't had a Democratic president for the entire time in history that they've been having these problems. And so $30 billion, yeah, that definitely is going to help some HBCUs, but that is nothing in compared to the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Tom, we can't look at it that way, though, Tom. That is true. I agree with you. That is true.
You compare that to the hundreds of millions of dollars that and I don't want to distract, given the time. I don't want to distract too much from the central theme here. But, the key that we'll need to focus on is that this is going to be a problem that is not going to be an easy fix. You've got issues on the administrative side. They currently have an interim president and a board of trustees. Obviously, they have students and alumni who have been, screaming at what they feel is a lack of responsibility.
Tom, the answer is you need money to fix those things.
I understand that, Jim. But
so you vote for a person who cuts. Like I said, okay, the $30 million to Harvard, to any of the Ivy League schools doesn't mean anything. they can survive. But $30 million to a HBCU is a lot of money that they can do a great deal of work to repair their campuses, to buy equipment, and to uplift the quality of their education. There's no comparison about, so us comparing what we don't get HBCUs compared to white universities. Um, so we already know that's the case. But with whatever money that you can get, one, to take money that was already allocated to you away from you hurts. And the money that you're already getting to have two presidents, Obama and Joe Obama, which is a continuation of Obama, to cut money away from the universities when they're the ones in the deepest need. I saw some of the videos where the kids were showing the mold in the dormitory, the poor conditions, the cafeteria. I mean, Tom, this is not just to embarrass this one HBCU. I'm pretty sure most of them are suffering through the same kind of condition. And the tuitions there are not cheap. It's not like, they're paying $30 a credit hour to attend there. A lot of times those tuitions are tens of thousands of dollars that they either get in debt for or their parents having to pay. And to go to a school with these kind of conditions when they could easily take that money someplace else and attend a better quality university.
Well, Jimmy, this is not something that's going to be solved today. Obviously, this is a historical narrative that they have been dealing with for decades upon decades. I believe this institution, over 100 years old. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, this isn't something when we're talking about decades upon decades of neglect. This
Well,
isn't
Tom,
something.
let's start by reaching out to our elected.
The unfortunate
Let's
thing
start by
about
reaching out to our elected politicians
I
and
would
tell them
agree.
to store the money. Let's just start there. The money that you're already giving to HBCUs, put that money back, and then we'll talk about how well they're going to manage the money afterwards. But at least put
Well,
that back and restore them to where they were.
but there has to be accountability in place. And of
There,
course,
there does, Tom. I agree.
unfortunately, this is not the only school, and it's not just HBCUs. I mean, there are other universities, predominantly white institutes, that have these issues as well. But because our institutions are smaller, because they have been neglected for such a long period of time relative to their predominantly white counterparts, it just exacerbates the issue. And this is something that, regardless of whether we are alumnus of HBCUs or PWIs. We have a vested interest because, at the end of the day, a lot of our kids are getting their education at these schools, and it's something that we have to pay
Well,
attention to.
it's still the 104 HBCUs graduate as many blacks as the 3,000 white universities. So they play a very important role, and
Correct.
for that reason, we need to make sure that they survive. But with that being said, Tom, let's move on to Howard University. And see, this is another reason that our HBCUs need their money, they need repairs, they need to be brought up to par so you could compete for. There's a lot of money doing defense research. They have billions of dollars they spread out to the university to test out weapons, to find the best grade of let's say, bullet casings for the bullets. I mean, there are a lot of research projects that are going on that the military sponsors, but you have to have some Class A research facilities to qualify for that kind of stuff. And so our HBCUs need money. I'm hoping we can bring them up to par where they too can compete for some of this research money, medical research money and military research money. But let's talk about Howard and their award, because this may be the first time
It is.
ever in the history that a HBCU has been awarded a military defense contract to do research.
Correct. And definitely hats off to Howard University for
Yes.
being the first historically black college university awarded a contract of this nature, but they have been awarded $90 million for military research, for research and development on tactical autonomy technology for military systems. And, I don't have the specifics in terms of how long and if this is a annual thing or a one-time thing, but the thing that we do know is that this is a huge infusion of capital for Howard, which is considered one of the top tiers of the HBCUs in terms of driving money for STEM academic disciplines. And that is the key thing because, unfortunately, Jimmy, like a lot of other cases, a lot of our schools, our HBCUs, don't get a lot of funding for STEM related disciplines.
Tom, they used to have some set aside with STEM. Obama took that away and basically made them compete against all the other universities. Just threw them into the pot with the other 3,000 to compete for STEM money. So the
This
money
is a,
once
this is a major deal. This is
that's
really a
major.
major
So and generally, once you become a research center, either for the government for medical research or social research or research that they do on certain countries, like Russian research to keep up what's going on. But defense contractors are generally pretty stable. When you become one of the research centers, that's generally long term, Tom. I never ever hear about someone being doing research for the military and then being cut out of the program. So you normally don't, never hear about a school being dropped as a research center. So normally when they start dumping money into your university to do research for them, as long as you do a quality job in researching the issues that they want or proposing new ways of developing more destructive weapons to kill people, which is what they're interested in, you can make a ton of money doing research for the military.
I would agree. And the U.S. Air Force and the Department of Defense are funding this project, the
Okay.
University Affiliated Research Center. And so, presumably, Jimmy, this is going to be a long-term, ongoing investment for Howard University, which is exceptional news. HBCUs produce 30% of all professional STEM workers, according to the news report that I looked at earlier today. And so, I mean, this is fantastic news. And the question is pushing for more of our HBCUs to get these.
I'm putting, well, yes, Tom, we need to push for more of that research money to go to the HBCUs. That would really help their programs be elevated.
So this is absolutely fantastic news. We're going to definitely have to keep an eye on this, Jimmy, and see how that is going, and make sure we understand where the money is going, and more importantly, how that's going to impact our communities, especially in the STEM areas. And I've seen things like this, Jimmy, with our grammar schools and our developmental schools, Jimmy. So this is something that we have to make sure that we continue to applaud, highlight, and give as much shine to something like this as to the other things, Jimmy, that we prefer not to talk about, but we have to make sure that we highlight so that we can focus on accountability and responsibility in our communities.
and once again, your elected representatives put pressure on them to increase. Now, I know they have no little control over what the military does, but they can certainly use some of their influence when it comes to budgeting to just say, hey, we'd like to see an increase in research dollars going to HBCUs. That's not too much to ask for, and the military will comply just to, keep Congress happy and keep the funding going. So our representatives can do a little bit more than they've been doing. So let's start here, but let's next year when the budget rolls around, let's see if we can't get a few more schools added to that list.
Yeah, absolutely, Jimmy. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know how long this has been out there, how long this has been coming, Jimmy, but at the end of the day, however long it took, obviously it was well worth the wait, and looking forward to hearing more about this in the future.
Yes.
Good deal. All right, let's shift. We talked a little bit about what was going on with the Haitian crisis, and unfortunately, Jimmy, it's not getting any better in Haiti. And
No, it's not.
I've read a couple of articles in the last week since we first reported on this. For those of you who are not aware, there are no democratically elected
None, Tom.
officials left in the country of Haiti, and we as a community have to have a vested interest in this, because for those of us who know the history, we understand the history and the impact that Haiti, Toussaint Louverture, Dessalines, and the long line of military leaders who fought for and helped achieve independence in Haiti of their colonizers, and the impact that that had on the United States in multiple ways, not just leading towards the eventual abolition of slavery, Jimmy, but when you look at the land that, in essence, had to be sold by, at the time, the greatest country in the world, France, well, militarily at least, and
Yes,
Napoleon.
they had the strongest military in the world at that time.
And we look at France's position in the world, how this little small country with very little military power, very little military weaponry, was able to hold off the Spaniards, the French, and the English, turn around and achieve their own freedom, which Jimmy ultimately worked in the United States' favor, not just those who were the descendants of slaves, but the country itself. Because when you look at the Louisiana Purchase, you cannot talk about the Louisiana Purchase without talking about the revolution in Haiti.
Well, Tom, there's a lot that was tied to those historic events. And to me, I still say that that was, even though there were a lot of societies and movements to abolish slavery in the Western Hemisphere, what happened with Haiti and Napoleon really was a catalyst for the story. It scared the Europeans out of the slave business and pushed the Brits and Americans to do everything they could to stop trade from Africa. And as they slowly dismantled slavery up and down Central and South America, and even here in the Americas, which resulted in a civil war for us to finally abolish. But Tom, it started with this one little nation. This just goes to show that when people finally get their freedom, and you tell them that you're going to force them back into bondage, that they will fight to because they have nothing to lose at that point. So the Haitians had nothing at all to lose when going up against a much superior army, trained and equipment-wise, against Napoleon forces. So they were fighting for their freedom, where Napoleon army was fighting for a paycheck. So the main motivation was a little different. And then after the conflict, um, their answer was to kill most of the white people in Haiti at the time, except medical. If you had medical skills, you survived. But everybody else, man, woman, and child, had to die to send a message, and that scared the living, you know what, out of a lot of nations, Tom. So, but their answer to how they dealt with this, I don't think the Western powers had ever forgiven the Haitians for their response. It was like, okay, you won the battle against Napoleon. You could have just left it there. Well, they could have, Tom, but that's not what they did. We know that, and I don't think they've ever been forgiven by Western powers for their response, even though Western powers have done much more brutal things in their response to other nations.
Yeah. And so this past week, or actually earlier this week, Jimmy, on Monday, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres
Is he going to
insisted.
send an army down there? Is he going to send money?
Well, what he's insisting on and what he's pushing for is the deployment of an international, a specialized armed force to Haiti.
Yeah,
And he's
Tom,
going to
the
go in
UN
and
last time I checked have a peacekeeping force, and somehow they never seem to be able to keep the peace anywhere because as soon as the first bullets fire, they run. So all that really means he's going to call on the United States and NATO to kind of do something. And so, what is the UN peacekeepers that we fund and spend our money for? What are they good for? They can't keep the peace anywhere. He has a
well,
large army. The UN has a large peacekeeping force of its own. So
well, Jimmy,
send them in first to keep the
I
peace.
will say this much: I don't believe that the Haitian National Police are going to be able to deal with I said 150 last week. Actually, I saw another estimate that said 200 gangs. That I think last we talked, it was 60%, and some of the folks on the ground are saying that they have about 100% of Port-au-Prince, which is
Yeah,
the capital of Haiti. And so, literally, I mean, they are running the capital and they are running the country right now.
60% was kind of a conservative estimate, Tom. 150 gangs, 60%, but you're right. It's probably closer to 200, and they probably control most of the country, if not all of it.
Exactly, Jimmy. And so, unfortunately, the national police is not faring so well in terms of being able to beat back the
Tom, there's
gang.
too many
They, they,
gangs.
they control the territory. They control the turf. They are controlling the politics. The only de facto leader right now who was not elected isn't in a position to do anything. Has no leverage whatsoever. And so, in essence, the UN chief is saying, you know what? We've got to deploy some military power there, and we have got to. They are calling on countries also to stop deporting back to Haiti, because in essence, what you're saying is you're putting
Correct.
people back in harm's way.
People are trying to get out of there, and yeah, you send them back to harm's way.
They're trying to flee a nation where, unfortunately, I mean, there is, death, rape, ransom, anything that you can think of, Jimmy. I mean, this, if there was any other country other than Haiti, it would have been an international crisis. But because it is Haiti, nobody seems to care. But you tell me any other small country, not Haiti, not a dark country that this is happening in, and there would have been forces there that would have been stabilizing.
Well, Tom, so to do the comparisons, I think creates an unfair argument. The reality is that, yeah, you're right. No one cares, but Black people here in America need to care.
Exactly, and that's why we're talking about
speak up and let your voice be known, not just on this issue, on all the issues that we've raised tonight on this show and in the past. But this is an opportunity for Black folks here to reach out and extend an arm, and for us to start building the relationships that are going to be needed to stabilize Haiti. If we do it in Haiti, we can do it in other Caribbean nations that have a large Black population. We can do it in Brazil, which has a large Black population. We can do it in Mexico. We can do it in Africa. So we can reach out to Black folks around the world and start building relationships that we need to increase economic ties. Because, Tom, just like the HBCUs, Haiti needs money. They have to have an infusion of capital in order to rebuild. And God knows what happened to the $4 billion that was raised to rebuild Haiti, that the Bush and the Clintons, squandered through, and they have nothing to show for it now but a stadium. But we need that kind of money once again. And if they need someone to look after it, call me. I'll tell them exactly where to spend it to rebuild. For $4 billion, I'm going to rebuild that I'm going to bulldoze the entire island and rebuild it.
Well, Jimmy, all that being said is, we discussed this last week, and I know we have different directions on this, but I don't believe that obviously the people of Haiti are going to be able to solve this problem in and of themselves. Those who
they have no choice.
Those who do have the country's best interests in mind, who are in Haiti, do not have the firepower to be able to do anything.
Right. So that's why they need to. That's why they need to align with us and partner with us to give them the weapons. We just gave 31 tanks.
Quite frankly, the Black community in this country does not have access.
No, Tom. But you have our Black politicians, the Congressional Black Sellout Caucus. They can squeeze the administration to supply freedom fighters in Haiti who are interested in taking over the country and putting it back on the right track. We just gave 31 M1 tanks to Ukraine.
True.
We have some spare M16s and NATO rounds in our warehouses that we can supply freedom fighters in Haiti. But they need to organize the freedom fighters.
I would agree.
So the UN is not going to send any peacekeepers because they don't keep the peace. As soon as the first bullet is fired, they're going to run. And no Western nation is going to send troops and have their sons dying on Haitian soil.
It is very evident, Jimmy, unfortunately, that the United States, Canada, definitely not France. France is one of
the definitely not the French. You can count that out.
France is the primary, even though Haiti helped build their economy. Let's keep it 100. Haiti helped build the French economy. Again, at that point in time when they were colonizing the Haitians, or what we now call Haiti, we were the most profitable economy in the world at that time for France. France has no interest whatsoever in helping to support the people who actually built their economy, and obviously the Canadians and the United States does not. And so this is when you have to call your elected officials. This is when you have to start writing chips. This is when you have to call in those chips to say, you know what, something has to be done. It's them. It could be us. And so ultimately, Jimmy, this is where we have to be our brother's keeper in another country.
And Tom, with that, we need to be prepared to step up our game. So once Haiti is secure and freedom and democracy is restored, we need to be ready to step in and to fill the void with the entrepreneur class. We need to be willing to invest there. and establish business ties with Haitian businesses and find some way to trade with them. Either we invest there to help build the business infrastructure that they need to sell them goods and supplies, but also we need to step our game up here. We have a great deal of black infrastructure we need to build out in the inner cities here also to supply goods and services. So this would be a good first step in becoming economic savvy, and so we can do the things that we talked about for years. So we've been talking about becoming a world class economic power since I don't know, since the end of slavery, probably. Maybe during Marcus Garvey time when it was kind of realistic that this is something that was achievable. We've been talking about this for almost over 100 years, Tom. At some point, we have to get out of our own way and do it. Stop looking for others to do it for us. We got to step our game up and do it. We have $1.6 trillion to spend. So let's find a way to spread that money around and make it work for black folks here in America and throughout the world where we can establish trade.
I would agree with you on that, Jimmy. Let's go ahead and shift to another international story. Sierra Leone,
Yes.
of about 8 million people in West Africa, just signed a new bill into law that, in essence, is their women's rights bill. So, I mean, if you think in the United States of the 1920 bill that, in essence, gave women voting rights in this country to a certain degree, even though our women were disenfranchised in spite of that bill until, of course, the civil rights legislation in the 60s, Jimmy. But this is landmark legislation in this small, I guess what we would consider to be small country of about 8
We're
million.
talking landmark for them.
Exactly. And when you consider the context, and that's what we have to talk about, the context.
This is a landmark for the African continent. Or
For this,
historically,
I said for this country.
right, for this country landmark. I'm going to say they're kind of late to the party because before there was any kind of women's suffrage movement in the West, women of the African continent, a lot of African nations,
they were leaders of state.
Yes. So they already had a great deal of things that Western women did not have. The right to own property, the right to wealth, the right to inheritance, the right to vote in the when there was the opportunity to vote for anyone. Kings often, the lineage for a royal family often came through the woman because the kings often died early from fighting. A lot of times they would have to go off, so the kingdom was left in the hand of the woman, and so the bloodline generally ran through the queens. In Western powers, the bloodlines ran through the kings and their sons. So a lot of the things that were, we got to keep in mind, Tom, that in the continent of Africa, it wasn't just that that was a knowledge magnet. So if you think about, you look at the Persians from the Middle East, you look at the Greeks, the Mesopotamians, the Spartans, the Romans, the Hittites. You look at the African nations from Libya to Sudan to Ethiopia to Kenya. All of them fighting for control of what? Egypt. And so that was a knowledge center, and that was also that whole little region of that part of Africa and part of the Middle East became sort of the central hub where everyone wanted to be there. That was a knowledge base. And so it doesn't surprise me that a lot of the rights, and they took more of an advanced role, not just on knowledge, but even for the rights of women compared to the rest of the world. So the fact that Sierra Leone is doing this now, I'm thinking, okay, where have you been all these years?
Yeah, it is amazing, Jimmy. So their president just signed into a law, a bill that basically made, and he made an apology. I mean, he as a president, he made an official apology to the women of Sierra Leone of the poor treatment and how they have, in essence, made them third or fourth class citizens, in their country, in the cradle of civilization. In essence, what this legislation done is it is mandated that 30% of the public and private sector jobs be given to women. It's opening up opportunities for education. And this in the context that historically, Jimmy, unfortunately in this country, women had very little access to education, very little access to justice under the law. Literally, Jimmy, and I hate to say this, when he took office, he had to declare a state of emergency because of
Wow.
the prevalence of rape and sexual assault of the women in their country. That as a president, he had to declare a state of national emergency and literally had to enforce, prison time because I mean, you had unfortunately girls 10 and 12 years old who were being married off to older men who were impregnated 12, 14 years old. They had, no justice if they were assaulted by whomever, Jimmy. And so for this particular small country, this is landmark for their women in terms of empowering them and really, Jimmy, not getting to the 21st century, but getting to the 20th century in terms of providing access to education, access to equality, access to jobs.
Well, Tom, let's be honest about this. And I'm not blaming the religion of Islam for this kind of thinking, but it seems to me that a lot of Middle Eastern nations have these barbaric thinking in their men that somehow women aren't worth anything. And as Islam has spread throughout the African continent, a lot of this thinking has spread right along with it. Uh, I, I have a Quran here. I don't know if you can see it on my bookshelf. I do open it up and read it from time to time. And I have the English version of it, at least it's translated for me. Um, and I have yet to encounter anything that really says that this is a rule that it's okay to rape a woman, and unless there are 5 or 6 witnesses, um, then the rape doesn't really mean anything. But I think this is sort of the thinking that goes along with a lot of people who practice Islam in the Middle East. Then that thinking has spread to the African continent. So I'm glad that they have taken steps to start correcting this. I hope that other African nations do the same if they're operating in the same barbaric thinking.
Well, Jimmy, in this case, I don't know how much the influence of Islam. I mean, Sierra Leone was colonized by the British. Historically a Christian country, so I don't know how much the Islam may have influenced policy in terms of Sierra Leone. But all that being said, our hats off
Yeah,
to President Bayo, and largely influenced by his wife as well, who has, ensured that there is accountability, for what should have happened, probably 100 years ago. Well,
well,
less than
let's hope that other African nations take
100 years
do
ago,
the
but
same, Tom. If they
it's been
haven't,
150 some odd years. And so, definitely hats off to the president and the first lady for making this happen, because the reality of it is what he had to also come to the conclusion is that their country was not going to be able to compete with half of their population
right.
locked up in the kitchen, locked up without education. And so there is no way that you can compete when half of your population, the women of that country, are not empowered.
Very true, Tom. So let's hope that other nations are inspired to do the same. Um, we have a couple of comments on the chat line here, Tom. I don't know if you've been paying attention to them.
Okay.
Um,
Good deal. Well, we have one from Ms. Audrey Booker. This is one of our earlier conversations. HBCUs have been systematically underfunded for decades. Coach Reed didn't sugarcoat the conditions there, regardless of a non-contract. He exposed it of what it is, and hopefully the penalties that will be imposed on the financial institutions that won't lend their support to give women um, failed
Fair and
loan
equal
feedback
access.
will be enforced. And she is referring to Sierra Leone. So we want to thank you,
Yeah.
Ms. Booker, for those. And so, again, all that being said, Jimmy, there's a lot of stuff going on right now in our community globally. And, one of our efforts, Jimmy, is to begin to tie what's going on with the United States, with what's going on in the Caribbean, South America, in Africa, because in essence, when you look at it, Jimmy, and as Malcolm said a long time ago, there's some similarities between what's going on in Compton and the Congo.
Well, Tom, the other thing, you're absolutely correct. And these, all of our institutions need to be aware that more and more, your dirty laundry is going to be aired on social media. So if you don't start cleaning this up and getting your act together, more and more you're going to be socially shamed. And I believe this is what Reed was trying to do point out a few conditions where the school need to make some improvements, so you can make the offer to come play here or attend school here more attractive. That you can't just keep stuffing money in your pocket and not making repairs. And so this is not going to just stop with this one coach, potential coach. This is going to continue to be exposed and let out of the bag or box by students and from other universities and other institutions. So everyone should be on notice to start cleaning your act up now. Start getting it together.
And
And
Jimmy,
whatever you have to do a car wash, a bake sale, whatever you have to do to raise some money. Reach out to your alums. They ask them to send you $5, $10, and start investing heavily into fixing the infrastructure of your school.
And Jimmy, this is one of the beauties, but possibly also one of the risks when we look at the democratization of journalism globally now because of social media. Obviously, you don't have the big large mass media companies that are controlling the narrative. You have folks out there who are significant influencers that just 10 years ago we would have never heard of,
Right.
who can shine light on inequities in the system. But the other thing is that we have to be responsible with it as well, because as it can do a lot of good, it can also do a lot of harm. So
Oh,
that
it'll give you a huge amount of harm, Tom, because when you post these videos out there, you're memorializing the situation. Those videos don't go anywhere. They stay there. They're in the clouds. And when a person do a search on your university or your institution, and these videos start popping up, we're the ones that say, okay, we fixed these conditions and now everything is good. No, they're going to see these negative videos. That's going to have an influence on them because those are the ones that are most watched and they're the oldest. The ones where you fix things up and made repairs, well, those are new. That view account is very small. That's gonna be at the bottom of the list somewhere if he makes the first page in the search. So yeah, we have to be very careful, Tom, because once these things get out there, they stay out there, and they're always available in the cloud forever to come. So you got to do a lot. If you put one negative video out there, you almost need to do 5 or 10 to make up for that one negative.
I would agree, because unfortunately, people tend to steer towards what they see that is negative in spite of what is going on positive. But with that, Jimmy, being said, we have a couple of minutes left in our show, about 8 minutes, Jimmy, and I would almost be remiss with all the great news that we have talked about today if we don't talk a little bit about football for a couple of minutes, Jimmy. I
Okay.
know, unfortunately, you were catching up probably with your boys this past weekend, and they didn't get through this past weekend.
No, they did not.
Jimmy, it's very interesting. So this week you have the Bengals and the Chiefs playing in the AFC Championship, and the 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles playing in the NFC Championship to determine who's going to be going to the Super Bowl, Jimmy. And I know that you don't particularly follow those teams, because I know you only follow one,
Well,
but
I know not. I'll kind of change that trend a little bit. I'm not going to watch very much football once the Cowboys are out of the playoffs, but I still kind of pay attention, Tom, to some of the trends. And here's the thing: the Chiefs historically always had a decent defense. We knew that, but offensively, they're always up and down, and so you never knew what the Chiefs were going to do until when they drafted a quarterback out of Texas Tech who turned things around.
that very few people knew about, Jimmy.
Yes, who turned things around, and now he's the hottest quarterback in the league, and justifiably so, Tom, because he makes a difference on that damn team. So what are they in their they're in their fourth or fifth championship, AFC championship game?
I believe
They're
at least, I know at least a third in a row, at least a third in a row.
in Cincinnati used to be a doormat for the most
Literally,
part of the
literally.
AFC until they went got a quarterback out of LSU.
Joe
Um,
Burrow.
who turned things around. So this goes to show, Tom, that you can go from being a doormat with teams that wiping their feet on you to being in the AFC Championship game or the NFC Championship game, contending for a Super Bowl. The same thing with Philadelphia. They go down and get the Oklahoma quarterback that used to play at
And Jimmy,
Alabama and
and
Herb.
Jimmy, and Jimmy, this is the thing. At best, they expected him to be a good backup quarterback for
Oh
Carson.
yeah, when they drafted him, that's exactly what they brought him in for. Because did they have Wentz at that time?
Carson
Cookman,
Wentz.
yeah, they had a big $120 million quarterback at the time, and then look at San Francisco. You go to the bottom of the draft, the last player selected.
The last pick of the draft, Jimmy.
Tom, the last player in the draft is not supposed to do anything other than hold that clipboard at best, and especially if it's a quarterback. There's no way in the world a seven-string quarterback makes it into the to the league and survive. Uh, but this shows what a good quarterback can do for you, and this is why the Cowboys are not in the championship, contending for a Super Bowl. We don't have that caliber of quarterback on our team. And I'm sorry, I'm done with that. I mean, I don't have anything
Well,
against the person that are
you've
normal.
been done with that, though, Jimmy.
But Tommy's been in the league too long not to be able to throw a quick slant.
Jimmy,
Third down and
Jimmy,
4.
unfortunately, Jimmy, I think a lot of people are joining that bag, right? And it's hard to argue against you at this point because this is year 7. This is year 7.
Tom, you look at college ranks, all the quarterbacks now, they have to be able to throw the quick slant because that's a third down play. And every decent college team always have crossing routes. Most of their passes are on crossing routes. And we have a quarterback that throws at your feet, throws behind you, throws too high.
Well,
Can't
Jimmy,
get the crossing
I
route.
think everybody could live with that if he just didn't throw the doggone interceptions.
Tom, when you throw him behind people, when the cornerback is chasing you and you got to step on him, and your quarterback throws the ball behind you, the ball's going to be tipped or picked off by the guy behind you. You know, you got to be able to throw the ball either to my chest or slightly in front of me where I can run and go catch it. And our quarterback doesn't have that kind of touch. So he's good with throwing balls, the long balls, at least he used to be. And then he's good with throwing if you on the stop routes. If you run and stop and turn around, and you're a stationary target, he can hit you. But when you're moving target,
there's something that you said a long time ago that rings in my ear that you said, unfortunately, this team that's owned by Jerry Jones has a way of coaching certain talent.
They'll coach greatness right out of you. Yeah, that's the same thing that's happened to Michael Parsa, to Micah. They will coach raw talent right out of you to make you an average, mediocre player.
Well, I'll tell you this much. There are a lot of teams right now who I think would take Micah Parsons, even though he doesn't have the sacks that he has last year. If you look at the way that he disrupts the offense, whether it's hurries, I mean, on those occasions, he obviously didn't have as many sacks this year. But when you look how he disrupts.
Tom, look how many games he lined up in the linebacker slot. You know, if you keep him on you keep him as a pass rusher for 17 games, he probably would have led the league in sacks.
You are right.
But when you got 5 or 6 games where you put him in at linebacker, either middle linebacker or outside linebacker, where he's not rushing, he's covering, then yes, you can have his 12 games as a pass rusher against somebody else's 17 games as a pass rusher. You know, when it comes to sacks, he's not going to be able to compete being handicapped that way.
You're correct. You're absolutely correct, Jimmy. So, you know, for those who are fans of the Bengals, the Chiefs, the 49ers, and the Eagles, you know,
congratulations.
We wish you the best of luck. Congratulations on great wins. And, you know, Jimmy, this is a very interesting weekend of the quarterbacks. I mean, because at the end of the day, you know, all of these teams, if I look at it with no exception, have great defenses. I mean, the 49ers, I think, have maybe the number 1 and number 2 defense in the league. Philadelphia Eagles, I believe, is the top 5. You know, the Bengals somehow literally had to patchwork their team back together. They've had a lot of injuries in the offensive line, but their defenses come up. And then when you look at the Chiefs, they're not a top 5. But, you know, at the end of the day, Jimmy, when they got the offense that they have the offense. Figure out how to win. So it's.
And here's the other thing, Tom, that I've been saying for a couple of years, that the money that we pay quarterbacks is outrageous. That you look at outside of, you look outside of the Chiefs, you know, Purdy and Hurt, I think Burrow may still be on a rookie contract
Is
also,
Burrow's still on a rookie contract? Jalen Hurts is still on a rookie contract. I
and
mean,
Purdy's on there.
Brock Purdy is in his first year. He's on this, I think, seventh or eighth game.
And so quarterbacks now that are coming out of college time are a lot more prepared than they used to be because they play
Correct.
year round. They go to all these camps and coaching. And if your quarterback can't throw a slant, can't throw the crossing route, then you know what? You're not going to make it as an NFL quarterback. And that's what we have right now. We're paying $40 million a year for at best what is really a kind of a good journeyman quarterback. And so if that's the case, maybe it's now time to go into the draft and get another college quarterback who's a little better prepared and at least can throw the kind of routes that we need on third down to keep the chains moving. Dak is just not that quarterback.
Gotcha. Well, Jimmy, we are officially out of time. It is 9 o'clock, the top of the hour. We have been able to exhaust our agenda for this evening. We hope everybody has enjoyed the show tonight, and we look forward to seeing everyone next week where we have another show of Black Men Speak, Jimmy.
Yes, and we're going to be speaking out once again on black topics, domestically, internationally, and socially. So, please tune in to get the latest progressive opinions from myself and Mr. Duncan. And because I don't think you can get this kind of commentary anyplace else on the internet, Tom. And like Keisha Jones said, we're not for play.
Absolutely.
So that being said, we're going to go ahead and call it a night, Tom. I'm going to give you the last word if you have anything you want to say.
Good evening, everyone. We thank you for joining us tonight. Have a great and safe weekend, and we will see you next Wednesday.